There is one moment in almost every relationship that later turns painful, where everything could have changed. It is not the moment the lies began. It is not the first argument or the first broken promise. It is much earlier than that. It is the moment someone made you feel, without any obvious reason, that they understood you better than anyone else ever had. That feeling is not always love. Sometimes it is the opening move of a pattern so precise, so quietly calculated, that most people never recognize it until long after the damage is done. Most people imagine a manipulative person as someone obviously cold, aggressive, or dishonest, someone whose intentions are visible in their behavior, someone you could spot immediately if you were paying attention. That assumption is exactly what makes the pattern so effective. The psychological signature of a genuinely manipulative person is not cruelty. It is warmth delivered with precision. It is attention offered at exactly the right moment. It is the feeling of being seen, understood, and chosen, arriving so naturally that your brain registers it as connection, not strategy. Research in social psychology has consistently shown that human beings are wired to lower their emotional defenses in the presence of perceived understanding. When someone mirrors your values, reflects your language, and anticipates your emotional needs, your nervous system responds as if you are safe, as if you have found your people. That response is not a weakness. It is a feature of normal human attachment, but it becomes a vulnerability when someone has learned to simulate it. What follows is the pattern. Learn it not to use it, but to recognize it the next time it appears in your life. The first mechanism is called idealization. In the early stages of contact, a manipulative person does not present as ordinary. They present as exceptional. They notice the things others miss. They remember small details you mentioned once in passing. They express admiration that feels specific to who you are, not generic flattery. Psychologists describe this as a kind of emotional mirroring taken to an extreme. The person is not simply being kind. They are constructing a version of themselves that feels perfectly aligned with your deepest need for recognition. The brain responds to this by releasing trust, by opening. The person in front of you feels rare, and rarity creates value. This is not an accident. The second mechanism is reciprocal vulnerability. After idealization begins, the manipulative person will share something personal, something that sounds like a confession, a painful memory, a fear, a flaw they claim to be working on. This is engineered intimacy. Research on self-disclosure shows that when someone reveals something vulnerable, the person receiving that disclosure feels instinctively pulled to offer something equally personal in return. It is a social reflex, deeply embedded in how humans build trust. The problem is that the initial disclosure is often curated. It is chosen to elicit your openness, not to establish genuine closeness. You share something real. They have already prepared for what comes next. The third mechanism is intermittent reinforcement. This is where the pattern shifts from warmth to weather, from consistent to unpredictable. After the initial phase of connection, the behavior begins to change in ways that are difficult to name. The attention that felt constant becomes irregular. The warmth that once felt unconditional begins to arrive only after certain behaviors on your part. Behavioral psychology has studied this phenomenon extensively. Intermittent reinforcement, a reward that arrives unpredictably rather than consistently, produces stronger psychological attachment than consistent positive behavior. It is the same mechanism that makes certain habits so difficult to break. In a relationship, this creates a quiet desperation. You begin working harder to return to the version of the dynamic that felt so right in the beginning. That effort, that reaching, is what maintains the pattern. The fourth mechanism is redefinition. Over time, your own perceptions begin to feel uncertain. Moments that seemed clear become blurry on reflection. A comment that felt unkind gets reframed as a misunderstanding. A pattern you noticed gets explained away so smoothly that you begin to question whether you were perceiving accurately. This is not necessarily dramatic or violent. It can happen quietly, in small conversations, in patient explanations that always end with you doubting yourself slightly more than before. The psychological term is gaslighting, but in its early and subtle form, it simply looks like someone who is very good at offering alternative explanations and very consistent in positioning your emotional responses as overreactions. Scenario 1. The new friendship. A woman starts a new job and quickly bonds with a colleague who seems to understand her effortlessly. Within weeks, the colleague knows her frustrations, her ambitions, even her humor. It feels like a friendship that took years to develop in only days. She confides things she has not told anyone. Months later, she begins to notice that her words appear in other conversations, reframed, used as leverage. She cannot pinpoint when the closeness became currency. Scenario 2. The romantic beginning. A man meets someone who seems to notice everything. The relationship begins with an intensity that feels profound. He is told he is different, that this connection is rare. Then, slowly, the consistency disappears. He finds himself replaying conversations, wondering what he said wrong, trying to recover a version of the relationship that existed early on. He works harder. The dynamic shifts further. Scenario 3. The workplace dynamic. A team member has a manager who, in private conversations, always seems understanding and supportive. But in group settings, the same support never arrives. Over time, the team member finds themselves feeling isolated from peers, more dependent on the manager for validation, and less certain of their own professional judgment. They cannot identify exactly how they arrived there. Recognizing this pattern begins before it completes itself. The earliest signal is a speed of intimacy that outpaces normal relationship development. Genuine connection deepens gradually. When closeness arrives fully formed, almost immediately, it is worth slowing down and observing rather than simply receiving. A second signal is the feeling of being unusually understood by someone you have only recently met. That feeling is not inherently false, but it warrants attention. Ask yourself, do I know this person as well as they seem to know me? Emotional regulation is the most effective defense. Not suspicion, not withdrawal, but the ability to stay grounded in your own perceptions over time. Journaling, trusted outside relationships, and regular self-reflection can protect the accuracy of your internal experience. Boundaries are not walls, they are measurements. They tell you how someone responds when you introduce limits. A person acting in good faith will respect a boundary even if they do not prefer it. A person following a pattern will apply pressure, however gently, to dissolve it. Here is what the research and the human experience both confirm. A manipulative pattern requires one essential ingredient to survive: your uncertainty about your own perception. The moment you begin to trust what you observe, to hold your own experience as valid data, the pattern loses its primary point of leverage. This does not mean every warm person is calculating, or that every relationship that begins quickly is dangerous. The world contains genuine connection, and it is worth pursuing, but awareness changes what you allow to take root. Once you understand the mechanics of this pattern, you are no longer navigating it blind. You are watching it. And something that is being watched clearly, calmly, and without panic cannot quietly reshape you from the inside. That is the only protection that consistently works. Not fear, not cynicism,